The Whispering Shadow, A Tale of Lost Time. It was late autumn when Eleanor discovered the strange clock. Eleanor had always been a quiet librarian at a forgotten village library. Her days were spent surrounded by dusty bookshelves and aged manuscripts. On one rainy afternoon, as she cleaned the attic of the library, she found a small oak box, pushed into the corner, hidden under piles of old paper. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, was an antique clock. The clock was unlike any she had seen before. Its delicate engravings seemed to shift in the dim light, and its hands ticked in reverse. On its back was an inscription: "Time is never lost, only forgotten." Intrigued, Eleanor set the clock on her desk. She couldn't help but feel drawn to it. Over the following days, the clock's backward ticking echoed in her quiet library. But it wasn't just the strange clock that caught her attention. There was an unsettling presence in the room. At night, when the library was empty, Eleanor began hearing faint whispers, voices, soft and distant, calling her name. "Help us, Eleanor!" At first, she dismissed the sounds as nothing more than the creaks of an old building. But soon, the whispers grew louder, clearer. The clock's ticking became more insistent. Eleanor couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something pulling at her, something tied to the clock and the voices. One evening, the clock stopped. Silence filled the room, and Eleanor felt an overwhelming sense of dread. She placed her hand on the clock, and immediately the whispers returned, urgent and commanding. "Come with us, Eleanor. Time is waiting." Unable to resist, Eleanor walked out of the library and onto the fog-covered streets. The village, usually so familiar, felt foreign now. The fog was thick, and the silence unnerving. The whispers guided her, leading her to the old church at the village's edge, a place she had always avoided due to its eerie aura. As Eleanor entered the church, a chill ran down her spine. The air was heavy with age, and the building seemed to hum with a strange energy. At the altar stood a dark shadow, twisting and swirling in the dim light. "We've been waiting for you, Eleanor," a voice echoed. "Time was never meant to be lost. You must remember." Before Eleanor could speak, the world around her shifted. The walls of the church seemed to melt, and she felt herself being pulled through time. She saw flashes of forgotten memories, faces and places long buried in her mind. And then she saw him. A face she knew well. Elias. He was someone from her past, a man she had loved deeply but lost to time. Their bond had been severed years ago, and she had never understood why they drifted apart. "Elias!" Eleanor whispered, the memory becoming clearer. "Where are you?" The shadow replied, "You forgot, Eleanor." "Time took him away, but it was never lost. You need to remember." The clock in her hand began to glow, its ticking faster, almost frantic. The air around her seemed to twist, and she was pulled further into the past. When the world stopped spinning, Eleanor found herself back in the village square. But it was different, older. The buildings looked ancient, and the streets were silent. Then she saw him again. Elias, standing by the old well, just as she remembered. His face was the same, though his eyes were filled with sorrow. "Elias!" she called, stepping toward him. He turned, a sad smile on his lips. "You've returned, Eleanor," he said softly. "Time is never lost, only forgotten. I've been waiting for you." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she reached for him, but as her fingers brushed against his form, he began to fade. "No!" she cried. "Don't leave me!" But Elias was gone. The clock in her hand stopped ticking, its hands frozen at the moment she had found him. The village was silent once more. Eleanor stood still, staring at the place where Elias had been. The clock had not simply been an artifact of lost time. It was the key to remembering. Time could be lost, but it would always return to those who sought it. The village, the church, the clock. Everything had been a forgotten memory, waiting for her to unlock it. Elias was never truly gone. He had been waiting for her to remember. As dawn broke over the village, Eleanor held the clock close to her chest. She realized that time wasn't just a linear path. It was a cycle, eternal and waiting to be rediscovered.